Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. There's been plenty in the news recently to suggest that democracy is eroding in the United States. A study recently published by Princeton University and Northwestern scholars says that the general public has little to no influence on government policy. And with the Supreme Court's McCutcheon decision, which will allow more money in politics, there's even greater concern for the state of democracy. But this problem goes beyond the United States, with right-wing parties due to make gains in European Parliament and a coup government with widespread support of other nations having come to power in Ukraine. So the question is, are we in a worldwide crisis of democracy? Now joining us to discuss this is Robert Johnson. Robert is the executive director of the Institute for New Economic Thinking and a senior fellow and director of the Global Finance Project on Financial Reform for the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks for joining us, Rob. So, Rob, what role have financial institutions like central banks played in problems of democratic governance?
Well, to the extent that central banks are very responsive to financial institutions, and as we saw in the lead up to 2008, unreceptive to strong supervision and strong regulation, they, how you say, aided and abetted the problem that erupted in the crisis. On the other hand, they can play a stabilizing role. And as they sit in that intersection between markets and people, as a government institution, they can fortify what you might call the democratic needs or structures that create a healthy society and a healthy financial market. We have a lot of work to do to put that back in place right now.
Do you see a declining influence or ability of the nations to control multinational corporations?
Or I think we've been in that decline for quite some time, maybe 40, 50 years. Uh, the mobility of financial capital, the mobility of technological capital has pitted state against state, region against region, nation against nation. And as we've seen with the large, low-cost labor-based economies of China and India being integrated in the world economy, we've had a very, very profound change in inequality, what you might call a race to the bottom in labor rights and a race to the bottom in environmental conditions. The power of capital has never been higher, and the power of citizens is such that governments are now agents of capital to keep what you might call the production locations in their district. And the historic role of the capital versus labor fight, the state being the referee, has changed form. As Wang Hui, a famous scholar at Tsinghua University, said, we now have a deterioration of representation where the state works with capital to keep down the demands of labor in order to maintain capital in place, how we say, within the domain of that sovereign.
All right, let's pivot and talk about Europe. Elections are coming up at the end of May, and several right-wing parties are expected to make some gains in European Parliament. Do you see right-wing populist movements as playing a significant role in worsening this problem?
I think right-wing populism is a symptom of the despair, of the feeling that there is no direction home, as Bob Dylan used to say in his Like a Rolling Stone song. There's no sense of order. There's no sense of fairness. There's no sense of rules. And what laws we have are rules made for the elite, for the powerful. You're looking at places like Greece and Spain with 50% youth unemployment. These are not places where people are going to be attracted to anything other than a restoration of order and an alleviation of their fear. You see the same thing taking place in India right now, as Narendra Modi is running on a kind of make the trains run on time, authoritarian agenda. And people are responsive to this because they don't see any coherence in the system.
So what do you see as the solution then?
A solution, I believe, involves substantial reforms to diminish the power of money and diminish the power of large corporations in relation to individuals. Corporations are not people. Right now, they have the rights of people, but none of the responsibilities. They need to be taken out of the game. We need, in the United States, to go back to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and say what matters is not personhood, what they call natural personhood. A corporation is an artificial person They should not be able to play a big role in democracy, and the money of wealthy individuals should not be able to play the role either.
But how would you actually do that, Rob? Because it seems like a pipe dream now, especially after this McCutcheon decision. How would one go about doing something like this?
Well, it's very, very hard. We've let things get way out of balance in this country over the last 40 years. And I would say it's not easily feasible, but activity and outrage and protest, hopefully nonviolent protest, but nonetheless raising the temperature on the part of the body politic that this system is not tolerable, has to be part of the equation.
All right, Rob Johnson, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And as you know, you can follow us on Twitter at The Real News. Please send me questions or comments at Jessica_reports. Thank you for joining us on The Real News Network.